Before we get started, I would like to say that the British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam. Today here we have myself, Julie Alley, who's the marketing coordinator for the School of Health Sciences. We have Mandy Harris, who is the program head. We have Celia Lau, special guest speaker, who is a current student. We have Jennifer Elliott, who is the Associate Dean, and Jessie Taylor, who is a Program Advisor. And also, feel free in the chat to post any comments or questions as we go along. And over to Mandy, and Mandy is going to actually start the session with a poll.
Well, the majority of you are correct. There are 2 in Canada. So BCIT is one, and Michener over in Toronto is the other one. So there's just 2 programs in Canada for training clinical genetics technologists. So great. We will move on then, Julie, to our next slide. So what is clinical genetics technology? So I'm sure some of you have talked to people or Googled around, but I will give you, my take, what I know about clinical genetics technology. So basically, clinical genetics technology is diagnosing diseases, any disease that is associated with a genetic cause. We test for that. So any human genetic disease, we do not get involved with things like viruses and bacteria, and those things are sort of looked at by MedLab or immunology. But clinical genetics technology is really human-based, and we're exploring human genetic diseases specifically. So some examples of those diseases might be muscular dystrophy, trisomy 21, or Down syndrome, all kinds of leukemias and lymphomas. Well, we also test for things like autism. And we use all kinds of technology to do the testing. So some examples of the technology that we use are karyotyping. So looking at the big picture, all 46 chromosomes, mapping them out using software and making sure everything is there, it's not deleted or moved around. We teach microarray technology. So, millions of fluorescing pieces of genes on a microchip that we hybridize to a patient's DNA to look for any deletions or additions throughout the genome using microarray. We also teach PCR. A lot of you are probably familiar with that one, polymerase chain reaction. We do FISH, which is fluorescent in situ hybridization. So it's sort of a smaller version of microarray looking at specifically fluorescing genes. And we hybridize those to a patient to make sure they're present or see if they're absent. We also teach Sanger sequencing. And I'm happy to report that we're going to be developing some next generation sequencing technology components of our programming upcoming. So we're really excited about that. So everything that you would be doing in a clinical lab, like in a hospital, any major hospital, major private clinic, like Life Labs in a genetic capacity, we teach at BCIT. And we have a number of clinical training sites throughout Canada that you would also be doing training in and learning all of the technologies there as well. So that's a little bit about what clinical genetics is. And now we will move into, what's the next one here? Looking at whether this field is for you. So when you're trying to assess for yourself, would I make a good clinical genetics tech? Is it something that I would enjoy doing? We're looking for people who are detail oriented. They like to kind of figure puzzles out. You have good judgment. You enjoy working both independently on your own doing lab work, but you also enjoy sort of collaborating with the bigger team, trying to figure out what's going on with the patient. You might consult with other technologists or work with a medical geneticist to solve some tougher cases. If you're interested in honing troubleshooting and problem solving, so if you kind of like to figure out that, like puzzles or problems, and because lab science, you're always trying to figure out is the result accurate? And if I didn't get a result, what went wrong? Where in the process can I, improve things so that I'm getting the result that I need? So there's a lot of that involved with clinical genetics, as well as, do you have a Bachelor of Science degree with a life science focus? So that is an entrance requirement for our program. We need you to be coming in with a good solid foundation of all kinds of things like cell biology, genetics. All those type of courses will really set you up well for our program. Next slide. So looking at the structure of the program, it's a 13.5-month program. It's full-time. It is called an advanced diploma program. And what happens is there are, you'll spend about 25 weeks at BCIT hands-on, learning all these technologies and going to lectures and learning all the theory. And then you'll spend the next 30 weeks out there in the field at various practicum sites throughout Canada. About 6 of the 10 students that we accept do have a practicum placement outside of BC. So just so that you're aware, that's what happens there. And you'll have 7 months of clinical experience working with all of the things that I just described: cytogenetics, which is our karyotyping, FISH, different molecular technologies. All of those will be really sort of beefed up and learned in depth at clinical. Next slide. So what to expect for your career. So once you finish the BCIT portion, you do your practicum, you'll write the national certification exam through CSMLS, which is Canadian Society of Med Lab Science. And they post sort of their competency profile. That's all the skills you need to know to be a licensed clinical genetics technologist. And then once you've completed that, you're eligible to be hired at all kinds of, usually they're major hospitals, because this is a specialty of lab science. So usually housed at the larger cities, private clinics within those larger cities. Some will do genetic testing. You know, there's some techs that work in research, I would say not a lot, but that, you know, is an option for you. But most of the time our students land in larger centers, hospitals, private clinics, that type of thing, where genetic testing is occurring. And salaries start at entry level. Tech makes about $64,000 a year. I believe there are still five levels, I believe, to reach 80,000. So after about 5 years, you'll be at $80,000 a year. And then every year after that, you get an additional vacation day, which is really fabulous. So next slide. So now to hear all the nitty gritty about what it's like to be in the program, we have Celia Lau, who's currently in term 2 of our clinical genetics program. She's an amazing student, and I'm happy to have her here to talk with you about her experience.
Okay, thanks, Mandy. So a little bit about myself. I finished my bachelor's and master's of science from UBC back in 2017 and 2020. After graduating from my master's, I started working at the BC CDC, and that was helping with COVID testing. So I always knew I wanted to be in healthcare, but working in the COVID testing lab for the past year made me realize how much I enjoyed being in a diagnostic lab environment and how much satisfaction that work has brought me. So I learned about the clinical genetics program at BCIT through my colleagues at the CDC and was intrigued by the work because it involves the intersection of microscopy and molecular biology, which I have experience of both in. So I applied for the program and here I am. And so a few questions for me today. Why did I choose this program at BCIT? So the CLGT program at BCIT is really appealing because it has a really small class size. It's around like 9 to 11 students a year. And this year we have 10. So What that means is that there's less of a chance of going into a saturated field, and the smaller class sizes enables closer relationships with your peers and with your instructors. We're already planning for how we celebrate for the end of finals, which is next Friday. And another point that I want to touch upon is I know it's not always easy going back to school, and it was a tough decision for me too, but because the clinical genetics program at BCIT is only a year and a little bit, 1 month long, the in-class portion is only half that time. Most of the time you'll be training hands-on at practicums, so that made my decision making a lot easier, knowing that I won't be stuck in the classroom for a long time. And the second question is, what do I love about this program and career? So I love how relevant and applicable our course material is, and this owes to the fact that our instructors for this program are either still working in the field or they have really close ties with those who are. And so their experience and their networking and knowledge is really invaluable, and you really want to take advantage of that as a student. And I also think it's great that we're spending so much time at the practicum sites. So you're not only learning about the skills, learning the procedures of the lab, but it also immerses you into lab culture. And that's where you can network with future colleagues, supervisors, medical directors, nurses, MLTs, etc. And yeah, and the final question, where do you see yourself professionally in 5 years? So currently, I'm just excited to be launching my career in clinical genetics. And I look forward to building my experiences and expertise over the years, have a lot under my belt first, and then I want to jump at any opportunity to broaden my skill set, and especially in assay development and quality assurance. So that's where I'm heading. And that's it. Let me know if you have any comments or questions in the chat. I'll try to answer.
That's so good, Celia. Such a great take on your experience, and I'm sure really helpful to prospective applicants. So I guess we'll answer, I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for Celia at the end, and we can have her jump in and back on the speaker then, but we'll just go through a few admissions type of things. So next slide, Julie. Okay, so details. This program will be starting in September. The application period is from October to April. So applications close April 3rd. So please get your application in if you haven't started it already. And the program's really competitive. Usually we get 4 applicants for every one that we admit, for every seat. So successful applicants usually meet exceed our entrance requirements. So that means, you know, good marks, B to A marks, good letters of reference, a great understanding of the profession that you kind of convey in the questionnaire that you'll fill out. And then the Casper test, which is looking at sort of your social soft skills, if you will, doing well on that. So we take all those things into consideration. So keep that in mind. If you're weak in one of those areas, don't let that deter you. If you're strong elsewhere, you never know who else has applied and how you're going to do. So next slide. So the application steps. So once everything so review all your stuff, submit it online, create your profile, and do your Casper, get your letters of reference in place, your mandatory questionnaire. So pull all your documents together and then apply online at bcit.ca. So going a little bit more into detail about what those requirements are, a proficiency in speaking and, whoa, Julie, can we back up just one? So you need to be basically proficient in English, so have a good understanding of the English language to be successful. Post-secondary with Bachelor of Science with these type of courses that I alluded to before, like cell bi, biochemistry, molecular bi, human cytogenetics, human genetics, all those type of courses we look at to see kind of what background you're coming in with. Casper, that test score, we're really looking, you know, it's at an average to above average score. So if you're average there, that's great. 3 letters of reference, we really like those to be work experience if they can, or a combination of work experience, you know, a professor, maybe somebody you've done some volunteer work for, anything like that would be great. So just sort of putting your best 3 references forward, and then the questionnaire that you're provided to fill out, which really is trying to assess your knowledge of the field, what you're getting yourself into. And that's why it's great that you're here to gather that understanding. And like I had just alluded to, we look at grades above the minimum. We also look at whether your Bachelor of Science was obtained within the last 5 years, sort of looking for that relevancy piece. So your course is up to date, or is the content that you've learned up to date? Have you done any sort of lab work at all? Even if that wasn't a formal position, if it was like a directed study or anything like that, list that there. And then sort of all your academic coursework. Next slide. So for transcripts, if you could send those digitally, that's the best way to send those. These are a couple options. You can scan and take a picture and upload it, download it from your school and upload it. If you're from BCIT, admissions can access it, so we won't need you to send it any other way. Next slide. So this is sort of what to expect once you've submitted your application. So the admissions department will sort of look over the English requirements and those type of things. If you have any other international equivalents or anything like that, admissions looks at all of those. And then they forward your completed application with those criteria met to the program itself, where myself and a team of faculty will review all of the applications, and we go through a selection process looking at all the things that I just described. And then we shortlist the applicants, and I make a personal phone call to the 10 students that are offered seats into the program. And I will let you know, I'll congratulate you first, and I'll let you know what practicum site you've been selected to go to, so that you have an idea and you can plan. And you can also accept your position knowing where you're going. So, you know, most of the time, everyone is very, very happy and eager to take whatever placement they receive. The very odd time I'll have somebody not want to go to a particular place, and then we move on to the next applicant, and they will be accepted in that way. So that's kind of the process. Then you pay your fees and you come in September.
Thank you, Mandy. At this time, I'd like to invite Jessie to talk a little bit about the support services at BCIT.
Very much, Julie. So moving along from all the admissions process details and academics that you require, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the service areas that are committed to supporting your success within your studies at BCIT. So you've got areas such as the BCIT's Indigenous Initiatives Department. So they would be there for someone that has an Indigenous background to ensure a smooth transition into their first year. They would also offer peer-to-peer mentorship, a welcoming gathering place, as well as they provide clarification on Indigenous funding options. There's also the Financial Aid and Awards Department, where they offered scholarships, bursaries, awards, student loans, and all the assistance that goes along with those options. I'd certainly like to mention there's a common award that we usually reference, which is the President's Entrance Award. The selection for this specific award we like to comment on is not only based on academic achievement, but also volunteer and community service. So it's an award that commonly doesn't get consumed each year. There's enough funds in it, and so we certainly want to have you reference that, take a look at the details of it, as well as any of the other awards that are available within the financial aid department's website. We're also at BCIT committed to providing assistance for students with permanent or temporary disabilities. So if you've been accepted into a program and you believe you may need accommodation to be successful, I would encourage you to connect with our Accessibility Services Department. There's also the Student Health Services Department located at the Burnaby campus, at the main campus here. They have a health clinic that's available to you in case you are feeling unwell, or if you happen to fall and scuff yourself on campus. They're accessible with nurses and usually a doctor on campus available to you. We've also got in the same areas student health services, counseling, and student development for their department. And they're going to help individuals or those of you that have been accepted into BCIT programs to enhance your educational performance and make sure that you're maximizing your success within your studies at BCIT. And finally, in the same building as well as the last two, health services and counseling, is our recreation services department. They would be there to promote, encourage, and enable the practice of physical well-being. So we consider recreation an integral part of on-campus life, and we welcome all students to enjoy the services available through that department. So it's not just about studies. We want to make sure you take a break and get away from that, and make sure that you're fully well as you proceed with BCIT. If we go on to the next slide, I just want to comment quickly on the means to contact us in program advising. So we have a number of different means that you can reach out to us. As you can see on the slide, there's the option to contact us by phone for most days of the week, aside from Wednesday mornings, but it would usually be between 8:30 and 11:30 that we're taking calls. There's also the ability to connect with us through our drop-in advising services, which take place on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursday afternoons presently. We do have a mix of both virtual and in-person. So typically right now we're seeing people in person on Wednesdays, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays we're currently assisting virtually. As well, you can reach out to us by email, and we're quite on top of things with respect to email. But if you need a really quick answer, I would usually suggest trying to connect with us through the phone service. As well, I want to just comment that our website is important to check because the services do change from time to time, especially over the period of the pandemic. We've had to adjust and make changes. So it's important to take a look to see what the most up-to-date information is there, just so that you're not showing up to campus and we might struggle to accommodate to see you in person, where we might be just seeing people virtually or having calls from students. And then I think in the next slide, I don't know if I'm going to speak to that or if Julie is, but we've got a number of different social media options for you to explore and connect with us at BCIT. YouTube is a great one. I always encourage individuals that are interested in programming at BCIT to watch videos such as this for the information session, or we oftentimes have individual clips for different programs. And then of course you've got individual program information sessions such as this one, or sometimes more grouped ones like our big info session that happens a couple times a year, which can be great for people that are looking into different options at BCIT. And then of course, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on, Instagram as well. And I think, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I'll jump in. Right. Thanks, Jesse. That was very informative. Clinical Genetics also has their own social media handle on Instagram. I'll put that in the chat. And now it's open floor for questions and answers. So
I'm comment quickly. I directed a couple of questions to Mandy just through a private chat, just to make sure. There were some questions that were indicated in the chat earlier on, and I tried to respond to them, but I wasn't certain. I'd rather have you maybe comment a little bit further, just to make sure, to be certain.
Thanks,
that,
Jesse.
Yeah.
So what were they? What were the questions?
Let me just pop back up further in the chat here. See where I direct message you. So one of the earlier questions was, what platform of NGS is about to be added to the training? I wasn't sure if that.
That is an Illumina platform.
It's a question asked early on. And another one that I believe I was able to answer the question from Soha, and I was back and forth. You could see some of it, the responses in the chat, and others I was messaging directly. But just concerning whether there was the opportunity for the individual to be able to proceed with work, having completed a bachelor's that had a concentration in genetics, but compared to our graduates, I was suggesting that my assumption was that they would need to become certified in order to proceed with the employment, similar to our graduates.
Sorry, sir, the question was, does the work experience without certification, can they get employed?
Yes, or from their education that they've completed. So they've got a bachelor with a concentration in genetics.
Yeah, no, this program is necessary for clinical genetics work in Canada. So you do need to write that national certification exam. And in order to qualify for that, you need to take our program, our Michener's program, or proven equivalency program from another country and challenge the exam for CSMLS, I believe is how that works. So yeah, you definitely need this program and a certification exam to work as a clinical genetics technologist in Canada.
And then another question I didn't get to, just jumping in to comment on a couple of the slides there. Is there preference given to those who studied within their bachelor's program inside of Canada versus outside of Canada?
Great question. I mean, if it's equivalent, it's equivalent. Right, so then we would look at it just the same as it would be here. So we're looking at sort of equivalent things that have been taken in genetics, and we really scope through those applications and the reports that we get. So that would be fine. I think there was another question I saw popping up, quite a few, about recency requirements for the Bachelor of Science being within 5 years. Like I said before, if your overall application is strong and that's your weak point, I would suggest applying. It's not a deal breaker. We'd like to see that, especially though if you've had recent relevant work experience after that, then that might not be such a requirement. If you've been graduated for 6 years and have been working in a lab for those 6 years, then that's not a bad thing, right? So if you're well out of recency, my suggestion would be take an upper level genetics course at a accredited university and apply next year with that to show that you have an understanding of recent genetic concepts and can do well in that way.
Yeah, and that's outlined certainly as a competitive preference, like you said, on the program page. There's another question: can my referees send the reference letter with their student ID before I apply to the program? And I was going to comment to say that usually our admissions department is trying to accept everything as a whole. So you're making a submission.
Before. They won't before because they won't have a number to attach it to. So they need to create an A number for you, and then all your referee letters are attached to that number. So you do have to apply first. You don't have to have everything uploaded. You just have to have started the application process. So start the process. You can take your time with the questionnaire and that, but then you have somewhere for your referees to send their letters to. And you have until April 3rd to get everything uploaded.
And that individual actually has an ID, was for the further part of their comment. So
okay, then that should be fine. They should be able to have their referees contact admissions with the letter and reference your A number, and they will be filed in appropriately.
And just bear with me for a second. This is a long one that somebody's written. So someone that graduated in 2015 within Iran from a medical microbiology program. So they've come to Canada 7 years ago, and they'd like to pursue this program. Just wondering about how they could proceed to meet the requirements.
I think I answered that. Like if you have a master's degree and you've been working in a lab, you know, the recency requirement is not a must. So I would encourage you to apply. Yeah, so if that's the case, if it hasn't, if you've graduated 7 years ago and you haven't done anything in a lab or genetics related, I would suggest taking an upper level course at an accredited university in genetics. I mean, even just 1 or 2 courses and then applying.
And I just suggested to Amanda to consult the financial aid office specific to whether there is a particular award or scholarships or bursaries for this program, unless Amanda, you might happen to be aware of.
None that I'm aware of, unfortunately. But yeah, explore it.
And then someone that's looking at taking their CASPER test on March 6th is worried about it taking longer than a month to get.
We wait, yeah, we wait for all those CASPER tests to roll in. So even if, you know, we get the results after April 3rd, we'll still look at your application. We'll make sure to look at all of the CASPER tests that were written in March.
And then a question about anything specific that should be included within the reference letters or anything that would be of interest to BCIT.
Just like any reference letter that you have someone write for you, you know, I would say, you know, the more specific they are to your interest, why you're interested in the program, and vouch for the qualities that we're looking for. That's sort of what we're looking for, is people who can speak to your best attributes and why you'd be a good fit for our program.
And another question from Amanda: will Illumina be taught to students in this current intake, or is that something that's still being worked out?
I love the excitement. I love the excitement. We hope that that is the case. We have the equipment, and we're going to do our best to have something ready for term 2, but like no promises, but it's our desire to have that up and running. So hopefully for term 2.
And the question about, do you have any options for mature students? And I was going to comment to say that because BCIT receives applications from a wide variety of applicants, there's not necessarily a specific mature student application process outlined, but certainly each applicant would be expected to prove the requirements and apply and compete, putting their best application forward.
Exactly. Yes, for sure, Jesse.
That was sorted by Julie. Student did their math course 2016, graduated from their program in 2020. More than 5 years have passed. Do I need to take a math literacy test to apply? And so again, I think it goes back to when there's reference to the 5-year recency, it's a competitive preference. So it's not a formalized requirement. However, it just would benefit your application to refresh a course such as mathematics.
Absolutely, Jesse. And, you know, when you apply, you know, if you do not happen to get in, I encourage you to reach out to myself, and I can give you direct feedback as to why your submission didn't get accepted. Sometimes it's just we had so many great applicants, and you know, somebody else beat you out in this area. And sometimes we can give you those suggestions, like perhaps take an upper level course, or we need to see this. So if for whatever reason you don't get in, please reach out and I can let you know sort of why and what you can do to improve your application. And we really look favorably upon people who do that work and take that feedback away, address it, and reapply.
And again, I think, Evelyn, your question, because you're saying you're a PR and you live in BC, you did your biotechnology bachelor in Mexico, and the acceptance of that education from outside of Canada, or only those that studied here, I assume, meaning in Canada. And certainly, again, there's an evaluation process that's expected for certain programs at BCIT, and there'll be details outlined specific to that on the program page. So as long as the equivalency determines that your education from outside of Canada is equivalent to the same level of education in Canada, then that's the means to essentially put you on the same level playing field and validate that education in order to apply.
Absolutely. Any questions for Celia? Put her on the hot seat.
And I've got another one that says, what genetics program would you suggest for mature students with their bachelor's completed a long time ago?
We are the one. But like I say, you know, you can put your best foot forward and apply. We can give you that feedback. If recency, if we look at it and we do decide recency is an issue, we can give you direct feedback and what you would need to do to strengthen your application.
And what is the typical turnaround time between the application deadline and when the acceptance offers start to be sent out?
Great question, because as you can imagine, that's a lot of work to go through those. And we aim to have results out for sort of beginning of May.
We have a question for Celia. What was the most challenging part of the program in your opinion? Sorry, Celia, you're on mute.
There we go. I think the most challenging part is being able to time manage, because it's going back to the point that it's only a 13.5-month program and you're only in class for 6 months. So everything is compact. There's a lot of assignments and projects due. So being able to stay on top of that is really crucial. And that's part of the challenging thing about the program. The topics aren't difficult per se, but the sheer amount of workload is the challenging part. And because our instructors are very close to us and they're really accessible online, it doesn't make the course material as difficult as it is. So that helps a lot. I'm not sure if Caroline was also asking me about the team dynamic, but I can also talk about that a little bit. So yeah, okay. So it's a very small class. It depends who gets accepted, but right now our class is really immersed. We work really well together. And I think getting past the fact that we're all competing against each other, we're all very helpful and supportive of each other. We're always discussing assignments and just making decisions as a class. And that's also promoted by the instructors as well. Like, for example, we have, like, for our practical exam, we would be asked, oh, how did you work as a team all together? Because that's really crucial when you go into the lab setting where you might not be working by yourself. You're sharing reagents or samples with other colleagues. So communication is really highly talked about in our class. And we also have another class last term that's on professional practice, which I found was really useful. You really get to know other people in your class and how to act professionally. So that really helped us merge as a group of 10. And you'll also be working probably side by side because the field is so small that they'll be your colleagues one day. So you really have to be friendly to everyone that you have class with.
Great to hear from Celia again. That's awesome. Another question before we get too far down the list here. What are the practicum hours? So someone's wondering if there'd be any opportunity for them to work part-time during the practicum.
Practicum hours are just like you would if you were a full-time tech there in the lab. So your hours will be 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever sort of you decide with the person who's training you.
And I'm just going to comment just in general, most commonly with full-time BCIT programs, regardless of what component you're involved in, usually your focus needs to be towards your schooling. So I don't think it's overly common that a lot of students would work even on a part-time basis while they're studying.
I would agree with that, Jesse, but Celia can shed light on that too.
I was still doing part-time casual just on the weekend, working at the CDC for COVID testing, but that's only during the didactic part. I'm not sure. I have requested for shifts there at the CDC during my practicum. So I'll see how it plays out. But during the didactic portion, I was able to handle a part-time, just 1 day a week.
And another question, I think this is based on you mentioning taking another genetics course to perhaps refresh the content of the course. And the person was wondering if, would you recommend a specific university, or if someone had the opportunity to take a course online, essentially, would it matter where they attended the course?
That's a good question. Most commonly, people will go to UBC, SFU, something like that, and take like a human genetics upper level, a 3rd or 4th year course. I'm not aware that there's anything like that online. So we would really sort of look at that and look at the content. But so for any program, as long as it's an accredited program, we would look at the content and see, you know, if it's a good quality assessment of what we're looking for, which is really like relevant, up-to-date genetic curriculum.
There's also, I was going to comment further to say, there's a link on most of our program pages that references or provides you the reference to acknowledging which institutions or school educational institutions are recognized through csic.ca. So that could be a good spot to take a look at if you're
good point. I think it is on our webpage, some of those courses, and if not, please email me and I'll let you know more specifically.
Celia, I think you answered what the most challenging part of the program was. I'm sorry, I was probably distracted looking at the questions while you're responding to that. Typical age range of CGT cohorts?
I'll say it's typically usually like 22 to 30 years old, but not to say we have had the odd person in their 40s take the program.
Lab experience, Ms. Cecilia, I think you might have responded to. Is French-English bilingualism a valued asset in the field?
I would say if you're going to work in Quebec, it would be an asset to have, absolutely. And right now, every province is looking for clinical genetics technologists. So if that's where you would like to go, I'm sure they'd love to have you.
And the last question I can see here, unless I've missed one, how much is the Casper and snapshot weighed for acceptance?
We look at that again as a component of your overall application. So we don't have a really hard and fast rule on that, but we do like to see an average to high score on the Casper. So are you, yeah, average to high.
Thank you. And Cecilia, thanks for responding to that message about your looking at chromosomes under the microscope. That's fantastic. It's good to see the enthusiasm from a student graduate from the program. And it looks like everyone's gone quiet as far as questions go.
One last question, and then I think we're gonna wrap up. From Caroline, do we need to do this snapshot? I might not be pronouncing snapshot part of Casper?
Yes, this year as part of our requirement, we have added the snapshot requirement, which is a video component of sort of Casper. It's an add-on at the end, which just allows our panel to kind of get another view and, you know, to help us make our decisions.
And I'll just quickly comment as well, because Violet asked about preparation for the Casper test. From my understanding, you can actually contact Casper and they have some form of preparatory means. I think it might be sample assessment or some means to complete a similar test? To
Yes,
prepare
they
yourself?
do right before you write. You have access to practice. You can practice, I think, as much as you like, right, Celia? Celia's done it.
There was 2 tries at it, I think.
Okay, and with that, I'd like to thank Mandy for that great presentation, Celia for all of your insight, Jennifer for being here, and Jesse. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for attending. Please look out in your email for the slide deck and a link to the presentation. Good night, everyone.